Hello everyone, welcome to our Egyptian online seminar group. First comes off the near questions you can ask our speaker during his presentation or after his presentation. I have great pleasure of welcoming you, Professor Jung Koo King. Jung Koo King is an assistant professor in accounting at Harvard Business School. His research focused on financial technology and innovation, learned the data, debit contracting, and financial intermediations. Specifically, he examines how emerging technology and drive innovations in credit markets and reshape the information dynamics and incentive structures of market participants. His research has been published in top-ranking journals, including the Accounting Review, Journal of Accounting and Economics, Journal of Accounting Research, and Review of Accounting Studies. Now we will start our seminar with dear Professor Jung Koo Kang.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mohammed, for introduction and for the opportunity to present my research paper. And I'm very much looking forward to your comments and feedback. So that being said, please feel free to jump in and ask any question during my presentation. So as the title of the paper suggests, we are broadly interested in the two phenomena. The first one is that banks are making a huge investment in this data and AI technologies these days. So banks' use of technology is not new, but these AI and data-driven technology can have very different implication than traditional AI, traditional information technologies. For example, Jamie Dimon sent out a letter to their shareholders last year saying that he believes that this AI will be as transformational as some of the technological intervention in the past several hundred years, such as steam engine, printing press, electricities, and former SEC Chair Gary Gensler made a similar note, and we know that the regulators and policymakers are trying to find ways to effectively regulate and mitigate the risk associated with the use of AI in the financial sector, and without undermining its innovations. Another phenomena is very much well documented in the literature that the local banks have information advantages against non-local banks and play a very unique role in the capital credit market. So we study the relationship between these two phenomena in the context of small business lending and explore how data-driven technologies influence the competitive dynamics in the local credit market. So why small business lending? Because we know small business lending is very important for job creations, innovations, and economic growth. Not only that small business lending is important, it also faces important information problems because these small businesses are inherently opaque. Therefore, they are subject to the information problems such as adverse selections and moral hazard, which pose significant challenges to their access to credit. So one of the traditional technologies that was employed by the banks is the relationship lending to address this information problem, because by building a relationship and maintaining through the repeated interaction with the borrowers, the banks could collect useful and valuable information about those borrowers and effectively mitigate these concern over these information problems. And the literature suggests that local banks in particular are very effective in employing these relationship lending technologies, which is the focus of our paper. So what do we mean by local banks? We have two components in mind. First one is geographical proximity. So these local banks focus on a smaller set of the concentrated local market, and they have a decentralized operating structure and give more discretion to their loan officers for their underwriting decision, which is a source of their information advantages. So these loan officers invest more heavily in this information production about the borrowers, rely more on this private and qualitative information about borrowers for their underwriting decisions. Therefore, these local banks have information advantages against non-local banks and could effectively underwrite information-intensive loans such as small business loans or borrowers with a higher risk profile. On the other hand, non-local banks have a very different characteristics. They operate on a large number of diversified market and they have centralized operating structures with a large organization, and loan officers tend to rely more on quantifiable and hard information for their underwriting decision. As I said earlier, these large non-local banks, these AI and data-driven technology becomes integral and important for their strategies. So these non-local banks and large institutions are harnessing the various AI and data-driven technologies across their core functions, such as customer due diligence, loan origination, fraud detection, credit scoring, and trading and other operating process. And the survey evidence also suggests that these the large banks tend to be active in investing in these AI and data-driven technologies for the following two reasons. First, these large banks have resources to invest in these AI and data-driven technologies to begin with. And second, these large banks have larger data pool about their customers, therefore they can leverage these large data to extract the insight about the borrower performance. So this brings us back to our research question, whether these data-driven technologies influence competitive dynamics in the local small business lending by diminishing local banks' information advantages. So we argue that these non-local banks derive more benefit from these technologies in terms of their information production and allow them to effectively compete against the local banks. So this prediction is not without extension. First, the insight gleaned from the data-driven technology may not provide sufficient information advantages. And second, the implementation of this AI data-driven technology is a complex process. If this technology is not effectively integrated within the bank system, it may not provide sufficient information value for these non-local banks to compete effectively against non-local banks. So one of the important significant challenges in studying this question is that it's very difficult to quantify and identify the local bank's information advantages because banks' information productions and private information flow is not directly observable. So we rely on shock to local information that change the set of local information available for the non-local banks in the local credit market. And we use local newspaper closure as such a shock. So I'm going to explain more in detail later. So with this local information shock, we take the IO perspective and look at the competition between the local and non-local banks and quantify the additional market share that local banks gain after the negative local information shock as a way to capture their local information advantages. So as I mentioned earlier, we use the local newspaper closure as such information shock that reduce valuable local information available for non-local banks, because prior studies suggest that due to proximity to local firms and the social network, the local medias provide valuable information about the firms and the local economies. For example, they can provide proprietary information about the firm performance or provide information about local macroeconomic conditions or offer insight about the policy and regulatory update in the local market. And related to our setting, the local media also is a very important in the credit market. So prior studies suggest that media play a very important role in the credit market by mitigate the information asymmetry between the participant in the local the credit markets. And also, so therefore, we argue that local newspaper closures may strengthen the existing information advantages of the local banks because unlike non-local banks, local banks can substitute this loss of information from the negative local information shock with their own information production. So as you can see, from this graph, the local newspaper closure is not an exogenous shock. It could coincide with the various macroeconomic events. So therefore, we match the counties that experience the local newspaper closures with the adjacent counties that did not experience local newspaper closures and match based on their demographic profiles and credit market conditions to address some of the contemporaneous macroeconomic shocks to this local market. And in our research design, our main variable of interest, outcome variable, is small business lending market share. That is the ratio of small business loans issued by the banks in each counties to the entire small business loan issued by all banks operating within the counties. And adverse information shock is indicator variable for the period after the county experienced local newspaper closures. And we use the local market concentration measure to capture the local banks based on the ratio of loans issued by a bank in each county relative to the total small business loan in a given year. And in our first set of analysis, we focus on the period before 2007 because prior studies suggest that then document the existence of the local information advantages during this period and also the cloud computing platform, which is a necessary infrastructure for banks to develop and expand this technology, was launched during this period. From Amazon AWS was launched in 2007, Azure launched around 2010. So between these two periods, the infrastructure was implemented. So we focus on the period before the period to identify and confirm the existence of local information advantages in the market. As you can see, we find that find a positive and significant coefficient on this adverse local information shock times the concentration. So that means local banks increase their market share following the local information shock. So this is consistent with our prediction that because of the local banks have information advantages against local banks, their market share increase after following the local information shock. And to address the potential concern over correlate omitted variables, we also perform the instrument variable analysis using credit risk entries. So the credit risk entry into the local market can be used as the instrument for the demise of the local newspapers because credit risk entries eats into the advertised revenues of these local newspapers. Therefore, prior studies have used the credit risk entry as an instrument. So we follow this literature and use this credit risk entry to perform the IV analysis and we find consistent result. And also we check the pre-trend of our the difference in estimations to validate our analysis. After we sort of confirm the existence of the local newspaper, local banks information advantages. Now we combine the period after 2007, suppose 2007, and then study uh, whether these local banks' information advantages change over time. So we use these indicate the relative year variable, which captures year after the first year of a sample. And with this triple interaction term, it suggests that the local banks' information advantages gradually diminish over time. So with around 0.2% a year after when the local newspaper closures happen year after in the later periods. So after we document and observe this empirical pattern that the local bank's information advantages gradually decline over time, next we study whether the adoption of data-driven technologies is a primary factor that accelerate this trend in this market. So to study this, it is also very difficult to directly measure the bank's use of data-driven technologies because the bank managers, we talked to some of the bank managers, and it's very difficult to sort of tease out and quantify the bank's the investment solely on the AI technology because definition of AI is not clear and the investment in these technologies are sort of related to each other. So the proxy is based on manager survey does not provide um, like very accurate measures of data-driven technology. So we follow the outside-in approach and use the observable characteristics based on their actual decision to quantify those data-driven technology adoptions, similar to the industry practice that look at and sort of rank order those banks' AI maturities based on these observable measures, such as their investment in human capital and production of their innovations. We also use the web technologies built within the websites when we did additional tests as a robustness to using the AI disclosures and data storage budget. So each measures have its strength and weaknesses. And so for example, AI job posting, the data set allows us to sort of identify the various skill sets that required for this AI and data-driven technology. So we can identify AI-related workers using this data set. But this is a job posting data, doesn't necessarily mean that actual hiring of these workers. It just captures a job demand for the AI workers. But prior studies also suggest that AI job posting is also highly positively correlate with the actual hiring outcome. And also the banks use the M&As of the technology firms to hire talents of the other fintech technology providers. So we use these AI technology M&As to capture the bank's investment in AI human capital. And so as you can see, in a market where the local banks compete against non-local banks with such AI human capital investments, you see that the local bank's information advantages does not exist. The coefficient on this interaction term is not statistically significant. On the other hand, in a market where the local banks compete against non-local banks without such AI human capital investment, we still continue to find these local banks information advantages. So this analysis was performed during the entire sample period from early 2000 and the late 2000, early 2020. So another measure that we use is US PTO AI patent data to capture the output of AI innovation. And and also the another measure is web analysis technologies. The banks, interestingly these days, invest uh, or adopt and employ the various analytics technology on their websites, and they are like analyzing the chat history with the customers, or even do A/B testing on their website to better understand customer preference and their demand, which can be used as a useful information for their credit scoring and underwriting decision as well, not only their client origination strategies. So we use these various technologies built within the bank's website to capture such investment in these web analytics technologies. And to further support our main result, and we perform the placebo test using the IT technology adoption as an alternative proxy for the technology adoption. Uh, and we use this ARPANET node uh, as a as a practice for such IT technology, because prior studies suggest that the counties with the ARPANET nodes are more likely to invest in information and technology, IT communication technologies, and use as an instrument for the IT technology adoptions. So you can think of ARPANET as an earlier investment in this internet, um, and sort of laying out the infrastructure that allow for those entities within the county to invest in these IT technologies. So as you can see here, the even the local banks compete against um, non-local banks with the IT technologies, more IT technology. We continue to see that we still see the local banks have information advantages against non-local banks. So, but on the and then the difference between these two is not statistically significant. So this provides further evidence that data-driven technology has a distinctive role in diminishing local banks' information advantages, because we do not see the similar result using the information and communication technologies, uh, and it does not really diminish local banks' information advantages. Um, and also to address the concern over that the unobservable character the bank the factors might influence our result, we perform a instrument variable analysis using the bank's proximity, the distance to the AI research institutions to with the strong AI computer science expertise. So so we focus on the AI hiring decision because this instrument can be used as a shock to the AI um, hiring and labor supply demand. So we use this long difference regression and find that those um, institutions that are using this distance as an instrument, we find that those institutions with the hiring a high AI hiring, so instrumented AI hiring, explains a higher the market share increase in the local market. Um, so far, we in our main analysis, what we have done is that we looked at the competition between the local and non-local market in this local market. So in a first case, we look at the competition between the local banks and non-local banks, and none of them are adopting the data-driven technologies. In another market, we look at local banks compete against non-local banks, but some of them do have the data-driven technologies uh, adopted. So we compare the competition, and then change the market share to capture these local banks' information advantages. Mm. So But here in this analysis, we focus on the uh, non-local banks and look at the competition among the non-local banks. So in the non-local banks, some of them are data-driven banks and some of them are non-data-driven banks. So our prediction is that following the information shock, the um, so data-driven banks will be better able to compete against non-data-driven banks after the information shock, if the data-driven technology allowed them to better compete against non-data-driven banks. So we find consistent results uh, that um, the, the the data-driven banks following the information shock, they were able to increase the market share, but whereas these non-data-driven banks following the information shock, they lose their market share. So this is consistent with our prediction. So uh, please let me know if you have any question. Otherwise, let me conclude with my contribution. So let me first summarize before I conclude. So um, the first, I find the evidence consistent with the existence of the local banks' information advantages, and find that banks with higher local market concentrations, those local banks increase their market share of small business loan in the local market after the adverse shock to their local information. And we find that these information advantages gradually diminish over time. And and then we study whether data-driven technology is a critical factor that accelerate this trend by diminishing local banks' information advantages. And we find that local banks' information advantages disappear in counties where they compete against the banks with the higher investment in the technology, such as AI human capital investment, AI patent, and web analytics technologies. And we further support our finding by instrumenting the AI-related human capital investment with the proximity to their AI research institution. So let me conclude with the contribution of my paper. So we first contribute to this emerging literature on the role of technology in the credit market. So prior studies have documented the impact of technologies on the various outcome and of the banks. We but there's a limited research on how this data-driven technology influence banks' information production. So we contribute to this literature by demonstrating that these data-driven technologies empower the non-local banks to produce variable information about the borrowers and allow them to effectively compete against the local banks. Second, we contribute to this extensive literature on the banks' local information advantages. So prior studies document the existence of information advantages among individual investors, institutional investors, and an analyst. We find that the data-driven technology could reduce some of the information advantages traditionally held by the local banks in this market. So lastly, we contribute to this literature on these information asymmetries and competition in the lending markets. So prior studies find that various factors such as financial innovations, information sharing, and accounting qualities, media sentiment can influence, reduce, or increase adverse selection issues in the market and change the competition in the lending market. So we suggest that data-driven technologies enable these non-local banks to close some of the information gap with the local banks and reshape the competitive dynamics in the local credit markets. So this is all I have, and hope you find some of our findings and results are informative and useful, And thank you so much for your presence for my presentation today. And please reach out to me anytime if you have any questions or feedback on my research paper. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Jung Kang, for your contribution and your effort. It's really an excellent presentation and excellent paper. Thank you very much. Now, if anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question. If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question. There are some questions. One ask about the economic significance of the result.
Mohammed, so you're asking about the economic significance of the result.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a good question. So basically, in our in the economic significance, we see that the in our main analysis, when we look at the period before 2007, the following the local information shock, the local banks increased around 1.7% in their market share. So this 1.7% in the market share count explains about 25% of their average market share. So this economically significant increase. But we find that when these local banks compete against non-local banks, this substantial information advantages disappear in that local market. So that's sort of a primary result of this paper.
Thank you. Other
Thank
question asked
you.
about he wondering about address ethical implications of data driven lending.
Mhm. Mama, can you say that again? So what was the question about? So empirical.
Yes, he wondering about the ethical aspect of implication of
The
AI.
ethical aspect. Yeah. So the banks are heavily regulated institutions. So these data privacy or ethical consideration is an important factor for banks to consider, and it could be a factor that could slow down this adoption of data-driven technologies. So technologies have advanced in a way that it do not, significantly like harm or increase the risk associated with these ethical and data privacy regulations. So in our paper does not study that aspect, but our assumption is that the advance of technologies allow these banks to leverage those data without significantly, the harming or the taking greater risk on these ethical or data privacy concerns. So that's our sort of underlying assumption. Otherwise, banks would not make this decision just to because the potential cost will be so much higher. So then, so that's sort of underlying assumption of this paper. But that's an important research topic and a lot of paper could potentially study that aspect in the future studies too.
He wondering about use the loan level data to compare default rates in the study.
Yes, so in our analysis, we also study the aspects of the sort of the outcomes. So using the instruments, we did that analysis using these instruments of the AI hiring. And what we find is that those banks with the higher um, AI hiring, they improve their asset quality. In other words, lower the uh, NPL ratios and improve the profitabilities. We have some results. So this is consistent with their them having information advantage because they could increase their market share at the same time increase profitabilities and maintain higher loan asset qualities.
Other questions? If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask your questions. Paul, yes.
Thank you. I was trying to keep pace. Thank you very much for a very informative session. I'm just looking at the
Thank you.
table right in front of me right now that's on your screen. And the
Mm-hmm.
DV, or the dependent variable, is the percentage of loan weighted average market share.
Mm-hmm.
If AI improves the efficiency, i.e., less human time, therefore less cost, would it be interesting? You also mentioned profitability in your last spoken comment just before I started. I was typing it up. The question:
Mm-hmm.
would either profitability and how you define it, either as return on equity or even
Mm-hmm.
profitability given percentage of loans outstanding, give us a
Mm-hmm.
sign of efficiency? Because
Mm-hmm.
AI has a huge cost. A lot of the
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure that's going to be needed, technical debt, and all these other debts. While market share
Mm-hmm.
may be increasing, profitability may not always increase, or the other way
Mm-hmm.
around. AI firms are more
Mm-hmm.
profitable. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you've controlled for a lot of the NPL to loans and all the leverage ratios. I can see that. So you're controlling for
Mm-hmm.
some of the risk already.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious whether profitability, you mentioned profitability in passing, would that you have done some work on that and perhaps you can share some insights into it? Because I'm coming from the
Mm-hmm.
AI governance perspective and how
Mm-hmm.
technology needs to be aligned to the strategy of the business with
Mm-hmm.
some goals, either customer satisfaction, customer retention, and hopefully
Mm-hmm.
profitability. So thank you for a very
Mm-hmm.
informative presentation. I hope my question makes sense to you.
Yeah, your question makes a lot of sense and also very important one to for us to think about because AI technology adoption is not free. So it involves a huge cost for the banks, and banks are not non-profit institutions. Banks make this investment to increase the profitability, to increase the value of their shareholders and valuations. So, but it's not guaranteed that these AI technologies may increase or increase profitabilities on always. So it has a huge tension in the analysis. And from our angle, from the information advantage perspective, if the banks can increase their market share following the information shock. But if that higher market share requires the 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 substantial decline in the asset qualities or reduction in the profitabilities, we cannot interpret it as an information advantages because the banks these higher market share deteriorate their performance. So to make a consistent argument, and we have to verify, and we did, and the banks increase the market share, but at the same time, because of these technologies and allow them to effectively underwrite the borrowers and have the more insight about the local market condition, they were able to underwrite the higher, more profitable customers and price them accordingly. Therefore, we're able to increase their profit and profitability in general. So that's what we found. But we have so many analyses in our paper. So we in our presentation and the main analysis, we focus on the market share, but we do have that analysis in our online appendix. And thank you so much for the comments.
Are there any other questions? If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask you question. Uh, someone suggest he wondering if using autistic robustness test with alternative instrument, for example,
Mhm.
state level AI funding policies.
Okay, thanks so much for suggestion. So that could be used as an alternative exogenous shock for the AI, and we can potentially explore that instrument too. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? There are other questions. What do you suggest for future research in this topic?
So my suggestion for future research on this topic, right? Mohammed, are you asking that,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Okay, so yeah, um, so this is, I believe, is a very important research topic in general, and that's why I'm excited about these topics and continue to, focus on this area, the credit markets. The participant in the credit market and, banks and non-banks are very important players in the capital market. If you think about in the capital market, the firms and individuals and households rely heavily on debt financing. And this technology adoption in the landscape is a very important um, changes in this market, potentially disrupt or change the incentives of the participant in this market. So there are many different players in these credit markets. So we focus on the banks largely, like we focus on the larger banks with the resources to invest in these technologies, but there are also smaller size community banks without much resources to invest in this technology, but adopt technology in a different ways through partnership with the fintech vendors and so forth. And we can further search may explore look at the various market participants and how technologies might influence their economic incentives and may change the way they interact or dynamics in the credit market in general. So I think there will be very important and useful studies in the future.
yes, thank you. Are there other questions? If anyone have any questions, you can open your mic and ask question. If you have any comment or any questions, you can open your mic and ask your question. Thank you very much, dear Mr. Jung Koo Kang, for your contribution and your
Mhm.
effort. Thank you very much, everyone join us today, and thank you very much for taking the time to present us. It's been appreciated, dear Mr. Jung.
Okay, thanks so much, Mohammed. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for being here, and thank you so much for your comments.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I hope to see you soon in Egypt. You are very, very welcome in Egypt.
Okay, thank you. That will be very wonderful. Thank you so much.